Hello, my name is Lauren Carr, and I'm the Director of Education, Engagement, and Inclusion at Ensemble Theater Cincinnati. And welcome to Meet the Artist. Since we are unable to have these conversations at our theater, we wanted to bring them to you directly to where you are at home. Tonight, we are very excited for our two guests. You may have seen their work, but you might not have seen their faces. We're very excited to welcome Rae Kuhn, our scenic charge artist and production assistant, and Jack Murphy, our very talented technical director.
Hello.
Hi guys.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Oh, well, welcome to Meet the Artist. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So just getting started, where are you calling us today?
Our apartment in Bellevue, Kentucky.
Yay. It's so great to see you guys. It's been too long since you got
I know.
It has been.
So we'd like to welcome all of our viewers tonight. If you do have questions or comments for our guests, feel free to go ahead and type those into the comment box. We will definitely address those. But just to start, and actually, Rae, I'm going to just go ahead and start with you. You are our scenic charge artist and production assistant. Can you break that down for us and just explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. So a scenic charge artist is the person who's in charge of the paint shop. So everything that gets built that goes on the set, I paint and texture. So staining floor, painting walls, all that kind of stuff. And then the production assistant just means that if any of the design people, such as our set designer or our props designer, needs anything, then I am available in my free time to also assist with those projects.
Well, with some of those sets, I can't imagine you have much free time.
Yeah, it's a rarer thing as I've gotten more busy.
Yeah.
And Jack, you are our technical director. So what does that mean? What does that job entail?
Yeah. So technical director, it differs in the theatrical community than the rest of the world. Most of the time, when you hear the word technical director, you're talking about somebody who is directly involved with IT. Couldn't be farther from that. Technical director is in the theater. I'm an engineer more than anything. Also can be shop foreman and I'm basically in charge of making sure that the set gets built. I'm not the person who comes up with the idea for the set. That is Brian Mehring, who is our resident scenic and lighting designer. He basically makes the pretty picture, and then I figure out how to build it.
Well, that's not an easy task.
Yeah.
And it's not like Brian has simple designs. They're often elaborate and detailed and gorgeous, but
yeah. Brian is a big fan of non-traditional theater sets. Mm-hmm. His whole design philosophy is kind of spawns from the physical space that we perform in at Ensemble. With it being so close and intimate, a lot of theatrical techniques that are traditional in most other theaters don't work in our space. Because the audience is so close to what we're producing. So a lot of traditional theatrical techniques rely on there being a good bit of distance between the audience and what you're actually viewing. And that's just not possible for us. So he takes a very strong line heading towards realistic sets and materials. So more times than not, I'm figuring out how everybody else builds things as opposed to building a theatrical set traditionally. Yeah.
Oh. So we've all got these like fun little challenges that people don't necessarily know that we get to
right.
Opportunities that we get to face each week with our jobs. So if you guys could just give us a little bit of your background. So where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Where did you come from? That sounds ridiculous. Your background, Rae, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. I started doing technical theater in high school. My director there was Chad Weddle. He's amazing. And he started really trying to get the students to do more of the work instead of parents. So I was able to do a little bit of scenic art there. I actually didn't do any theater in college, though. I went to get a multidisciplinary degree in neuroscience and creative writing and fine arts. And then I started doing a little bit of creative, like special effects makeup. And it wasn't until the Jared Erland, an old apprentice of ETC, started inviting me to the shows. We went to high school together, and so he invited me to see some of the shows, and I loved it there. And I started helping Ben Renan with some of the education drops, just like painting them in my spare time. And through that, Brian and Shannon met me, and they were in the market for a new scenic painter. So I started helping and started on with that as the scenic artist, and then the scenic charge artist after a couple of years. But I was really just working in whatever theater job I could get up until then in like smaller theaters such as Falcon and New Edgecliff.
Which is the first time that you and I had a chance to really work together outside of teaching was over at Falcon.
Yeah, it's a great theater. I still pop over there from time to time.
And Jack, what about you? What's your background?
Yeah, so actually my history with ensemble goes back before my professional career, even before I was an adult. I'm going to give a little shout out to my dad, who I think is watching right now. He was the technical director at ensemble in the mid 90s, and knew Lynn from back then. And then, decade or so goes by plus, and then I go to college for I actually have a degree in just theater. It's a liberal arts degree, and so I took the same classes that the actors and the directors and the playwright students, all of them. So I was at Hanover College from 2008 to 2012. And then after I graduated there, I started working professionally through, it's called SETC. It's a Southeast Theater Conference. It's a huge theater conference that they do every year. And one of the main things technicians do there is they get summer stock work. And so summer stock, there's a whole industry of theaters that are only open during the summer. And all of these college kids pile into these resort towns essentially to do summer theater. It's a crazy experience, but it's a really great way to get professional experience while you're still in school. So I did that a couple of years. And then after I graduated, ended up in Long Island for a little while, and then worked on a cruise ship for a little while, just doing theater wherever I could get work. And then I get a phone call out of the blue from Lynn asking me if I wanted to be the assistant technical director at Ensemble, and I couldn't pass that up. So came on home to Cincinnati, and after a year as the assistant technical director, they offered me the job as technical director, and I've been there for 7 seasons now. So. Yeah.
It's amazing over the course of the past few months in doing these Meet the Artist, we all have had, for every person who's joined us, there's been that moment where in these conversations, it's that someone says, and then I got the call from Lynn.
Yeah.
It's just been wonderful to really see how that's been progressing, with all of our guests. It's really really exciting. And Lynn is watching us right now. So.
She seems to be the tie that binds.
Yeah, absolutely. No pressure.
I will say I was the only one that didn't, because it was all through Ben and then Shannon and Brian. And then I met Rick and Lynn after the fact, once Shannon and Brian sat me down and were like, this is what the job is. Do you think you can do it? And then...
Yeah.
And I know we've got some other friends watching. Brandon T. Holmes is watching us right now, our beloved stage manager. So, you definitely have friends everywhere. Darnell thinks that you are gorgeous and talented. All of these wonderful friends that we've made throughout the years. So what was and Jack, I'm going to start this question for you. What was your first show that you were technical director on with Ensemble Theater?
Yeah, so my first season actually opened with Hands on a Hard Body, but I had already committed to a job that summer. So it opened without me as technical director. Actually, Matt Holstege, our production manager, took that one on himself. So the first show I was the technical director on was the second show that season, which was an Iliad, which was a one-man show. Bruce Cromer. Beautiful man, lovely guy to work with, fantastic gentleman. And watching him perform, it was like a master class in acting every time you watched him. It was really remarkable just to see him out there doing his thing, and to really that set was a jungle gym for him. he climbed every inch of that thing. From the image that you just saw there, it highlights the center deck, but there's all of this other catwalk stuff off to the sides. It's got a lot of set dressing and things like that. And he was climbing on that stuff, jumping off of 6-foot jumps and swinging on railings and sliding down ladders. And I mean, it was a hoot to watch. A couple of times we'd watch him jump off of something. We'd all hold our breath and be like, "Oh, don't do that." Okay, you're all right. You're all right. So it was a lot of fun.
And Rae, what was your first show with ETC?
My first show was The Legend of Georgia McBride. Also, was Bruce Cromer as well?
Cromer as well. There he is.
And also an amazing performance by him. It was an insane show to have as my first show because it is very like hyper realistic, dingy, backstage kind of look. And I remember that my favorite project of it was Brian giving me all of this old duct work and being like, make this look rusty. I don't care how. And just kind of like handed it to me.
It was new duct work.
Oh, yeah. Brand new duct work.
It was brand shiny new duct work that had to look old. Yeah.
So I took that very seriously. That was my I have to prove myself to make that ductwork look good. But yeah, all of those cobblestones, he had to teach me how to texture and paint all of that in the concrete. And it was just such a fun show getting to see everybody having fun. And Darnell, oh my gosh, boy, you were so amazing. But yeah, it was a great fun show to get started with. I was very proud of everything about it.
Yeah, that's definitely, both of those shows are ones that we hear so often from our patrons and our subscribers as favorites that ETC has produced over the years. And, Bruce is just incomparable. And he is such a physical artist that has to be such a challenge in designing us and building a set that that he will leap, jump,
Yes.
run through it, and it has to still be standing because Bruce will not stop.
Right. There is a lot of that, and there's a lot of that a lot more of that than I realized when I first started. I will say, on the other side of the experience, I'm happy I'm here now, but that first year as technical director was a rough one, and starting off with an alien, one-man show, big name, Bruce Cromer, there was a lot of pressure. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who wanted me to succeed in every way. So I can't thank my support team for that enough. Oh man.
I wish I had seen it. That was before my time. So I'm so sad.
Well, since those were your first shows, what are your favorite shows? So Jack, what was your favorite show that you worked on at ETC?
Oh boy. Let's see, my favorite show. I think it's gotta be, yeah, I think it's gonna be well, I think it's an Iliad. I think that was my favorite show I worked on. But one of my favorite shows that I know sorry guys. Grounded. That's the one. Yeah, Grounded. It's a lesser known, I think, as far as the show itself goes. But there was a big trick to that one, and the back wall that you see there, it's not quite all in frame there. It goes up about another 10 feet or so. The whole thing actually tips forward over the last 30 minutes of the play by about 40 degrees. And it was the whole thing weighed almost 1,500 pounds. And so we came up, I actually ended up calling, we've got some friends up at CCM, Sterling and Miller up there, the good guys that run the TD program up there, got a lot of knowledge on automation and things like that. So we had a little beer meeting with them and talked over some gear and came up with a couple of different ideas, little draftings that we had. And we've got the ones of the wall there, the draftings that there's a couple of different variations of the wall that we had. So what you could see there, like basically the support lines going back to our balcony in our theater, which some people may not know because we don't highlight it a ton. Normally we block it off with soft goods, but essentially what we ended up doing is running cables up to our ceiling and then all the way back down to our deck that supported the wall as it came forward and leaned over top of the actress. And the whole idea was to create the idea of this oppressive nature of her environment. And I won't go into everything about the play and all of that, but it was this very subtle effect that I was surprised at how many people didn't realize what had happened, yet still felt the feeling of the wall pushing in on her. It was interesting to hear people talk about this feeling that they got without realizing why they got it. And it was one of the first times in theater where I realized that the subtlety of tech can influence an audience member drastically. So yeah, I like that one.
So for everyone who is just joining us, this is Ensemble Theater Cincinnati's Meet the Artist. My name is Lauren Carr. I'm the Director of Education, Engagement, and Inclusion. And tonight our two guests are Jack Murphy, our Technical Director, and Rae Kuhn, our Scenic Charge Artist and Production Assistant. So Rae, what is your favorite show that you've worked on at ETC?
Hands down, it's Hedwig and the Angry Inch. That show was amazing, and probably one of the first times that I've worked on and seen a show that, even though when I read the script I wasn't sure if I would like it or not, I listened to the Neil Patrick Harris soundtrack just to get a vibe for it before it started. But Todd Almond and just everything that was brought to that with the band and everybody involved in that show, just Beth was amazing. It was so much better in person, and it was my first show that Brian kind of basically trusted me to do something a little bit more artistic. Up until then, I was doing artistic work, but it was more make this concrete look like dirty concrete, that kind of thing, a very realistic approach. And Hedwig was one of the first ones where it was like, hey, we're going to give you this massive back wall, and you should go down the street to Plaza and buy some spray paint and have fun with it, basically. Brian had a rough kind of design that he had made in black and white of what the like wording, and I quote that because there's no actual words on the back of it. It was very important that nothing actually spelled out a name or a word. But I basically had something to work on, but I was up on a tall ladder with all of these spray paints trying to graffiti this concrete wall. And it was so intimidating at the beginning when I just have this blank giant wall that I could mess up, and it's the only thing essentially on set other than the floor. And so it was very much like, if you mess this up, there's no going back. It's spray paint on concrete. Like, good luck with that. So
no pressure at all.
No, but so like at the beginning, it did take a while for me to get into my groove, but once it all started coming on there, I just like let it go. And I think Brian was very pleased with how it turned out, and I was pleased with how it turned out. And it really it was the first time I felt so creatively like free during a show. So I think that was like a start of a beautiful trust between me and Brian on that.
Yeah.
Well, it's so great to be able to see that photo as well, because as much as, you know, we all have these visceral memories of that show and experiencing Todd and Beth and the band. And actually, I believe today's Andrew Slitson's birthday. Just shout out. But that wall, while it was so important to the set, we didn't get to see the details. So, you know, being able to see like your painting of it in the shop there, it just shows how much intricate work really went into something that made such a big impact.
Well, and having it so it didn't spell something and having it look worn was probably the two biggest challenges for me, because I was having to play with how are you going to spray paint and make it look realistically worn while not erasing everything and having that layered effect. And also, like, it's a lot harder than you think to not to just like be able to come up with letters and how it looks like a word. It looks like it could be someone's name, but it's not. And I actually ended up looking up like Russian letters and stuff to try to create kind of the look of language without actually like spelling anything. And I have like some random numbers up in there and hidden, and there's like a chalk heart at one point. And it was very much an experience of just playing with it. And that's what Brian kept trying to make me do. He was like, just loosen up and play with it. It's okay. And I'm like, you don't understand. It's permanent. I can't loosen up. But no, it was a lot of fun.
I think one of the things that's really great about our jobs and what we get to continue to do as theater artists is we're constantly learning, right? Like, it is and I can say that as, education, but I can take that out and just put, my actor director hat on, and that we're always faced with some new challenge that it's like, all right, let's figure this one out. Like,
yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think every show so far has been like, oh, this is all average. This is all stuff we've done, except for this one problem that you need to figure out now, kind of thing. And I say problem, I just mean like a project essentially, but like, I think there's always something.
Very rarely do we get designs from Brian where he's not asking us to do something we've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times there's things we've done and he's like, here, it's kind of like this thing. We're just going to dust off that thing before. But there's always something where he's like, you think we could try this out?
And that's the
yes,
fun part.
Brian, we can try.
We'll figure it out.
So what would you say is then maybe the most challenging show that you have worked on?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that one right off the bat. That would be Outside Mullingar. That was my first year as technical director, and it was a beast of a show. Two things were kind of working against us. One, the designer was a fantastic designer. I'm not complaining about him at all, but he was out of state when we were building this. And secondly, he drafted in hand. So I had to take all of his hand draftings and then transfer them into my AutoCAD is the name of the program that I use, but it's a computer drafting program. And most of the time I at least have a base to work off of from Brian. But I had to work up all of my own draftings from start to finish on this one. And what you're seeing here is actually a detail drawing of one of the units that we saw just previously. It's if you saw the show, there was two houses that rolled on and off stage. Houses, it was their kitchen, living rooms, whatever. But they were all steel framed and had to roll. They were fairly large units. And so what you're seeing here is the framing of one of those units. And I believe it was the unit that we saw earlier. I can't remember the family's names. Yeah, that unit there. So it had the little doorway and a little slant on the end. So, that unit there rolled on and off. So there was two of those. Huge floor, two huge factory facades that had these arched windows in it. And actually, I think we've got an image of the draftings where we've got, So what we've got here on the bottom, it's just the windows themselves. And it's just kind of sort of illustrate, this is one element of a much larger piece and how many different pieces I have to pull out and draw and notate so that I can hand off just a piece of paper that has every bit of information to one of my carpenters or just a laborer down on the shop floor to build. And just the sheer magnitude of that show was insane. If you talk to any of the other production staff from back then, they'll tell you it hands down is probably one of the biggest shows we'd done. And that show kicked my butt. But got on the other end of it just fine.
Well, and there was rain.
Oh, right. And then there was rain. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was all sorts of let's see. Let me see if I can name all of the special effects in that show. There was a kabuki drop, which is a quick drop curtain. There was strobes effects. There was a smoke effect. There was a tracking bed, two wagons, rain, flying roof. The list goes on. Oh, RP screen, projection screens. Yeah, it had it all.
Goat.
What's that?
But there was no goat. It's one of my favorite stories. That Brandon T. Holmes was convinced that there were going to be goats.
That's right. Oh, I had forgotten. We pulled a prank on Brandon, our stage manager. And for the longest time, he thought that there was going to be a live goat in the show. And I think we got almost to first read.
How did you get him to believe that?
Matt was in on it, our production manager, everybody. I mean, he was, I think he believed us.
So Rae, for you, what would you say has been maybe your show that created the most opportunities?
Nice way of saying challenging. Yeah. I would say that, so there's two that I would name, and they're for two different reasons. One of them is the musical Fly By Night. And it was a beautiful set, but I would say that it's one of the more difficult ones because each of those tiles that you see on the wall there were hand cut out and also hand painted. And then individually glued in a quote unquote random pattern on the walls. And that was, that was very time consuming and very, it's one of those things where you get a repetitive job and it's just kind of like, it makes it seem like it goes on for forever because they're just the same thing over and over again. And also trying to make sure that when I stepped back, I wasn't having too much of one color in one space and having a pleasing assortment of the colors all around on the wall. So that was really difficult for that reason. The rest of the show was fairly simple for me, but I say that as if those walls aren't 99% of that show.
Yeah.
And it's such an incredible impact. I remember the first time that I walked into the theater after load-in, after the actors had been on stage, and I think it was post-tech because lighting was done, and just took your breath away. And then you add in the incredible cast and the music and the heart-wrenching story and everything else combined, but
right.
Set with the lights and those squares truly, and as you said, you had to put them in a random order. There's nothing when you're putting something up that's random, it can't be random.
Well, and Brian and I always say random doesn't exist, but he has this phrase called like meatballs in space that we try not to do. And he'll describe when I'm doing something that is kind of random and that you just want in places, you don't want to have meatballs in space, which is like chunks of a color or chunks of a specific texture that isn't related to anything else. And that's actually, I think about it a lot, even though it's hard not to have like a chunk next to something, but you have to make it flow with the rest of it. And it's really just going by eye. And I think one of the hardest things about that was that it was such a big show, I did need help. And a lot of the times I'm by myself in the paint shop. I do almost all of the painting and texturing by myself, unless something is just so massive that I need help. And on that show, I did have in some lovely overhire help to help me get those tiles up. But it was kind of me having to be like, oh, does this fit here? I need more of this color, and just trying to oversee that while having other people working on it as well. Having to give that like oversight up, I guess, and having to focus on that. And it was also just really difficult in the sense that like Brian and I kind of talked about different ways to have the tiles up, whether or not we could tape all that out and paint each one individually, whether we could have bigger tiles painted differently. And there were always downsides. And I still tell him that I don't know if there was a better way than what we did, because it ended up being a very nice piece. It just was time consuming. Yeah. And then the second show, I guess I would say is the most difficult, is Frog Princess, the most recent holiday show that we did. And I would say that was my most difficult, just because of the sheer amount of different kinds of pieces in the set. Nothing was something I hadn't really done before, but each of those darker panels on the walls are a special black leaf that I couldn't touch with my hands. I had to wear gloves or else it would turn orange. And I had to glue them onto a mirror type plexi. Each of the gold pieces are hand gold leafed. That's wallpaper that's been laid in. The floor even had gold leaf on it. So it was just a lot of very small, detailed pieces that all came together. I think that's why that one was fairly challenging.
Well, and that one had to kind of come together quickly at the end, because the units that you saw, the three main walls that you saw there, the two on either side spun. So it was actually more like four walls, and with the structural requirements of what they needed to do, we ended up making them out of steel, which ultimately made each of them somewhere in the realm of 1,000 pounds. By the end, once they got totally assembled, but what we ended up doing was they actually came together in 5 pieces. So even after all of the shop work was done, when we were able to load everything on, we had to assemble, and then we spent 4 or 5 days piecing things together to make it look like one thing.
And that's probably one of the hardest parts of my job, is that I can do a lot in the shop before we get it on stage. But if they have to piecemeal walls together like that, then it's partially my job to come in and make them look seamless as well. In Frog's case, they were able to help me with that, but I still had to go in and touch up all the gold leaf and that kind of thing, just to make it look like it was one wall carried in and not 6, 7, 8 pieces.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and Jack, as you mentioned before, because the audience at UTC is so close to the stage, we aren't able to do, fake theatrical sets, right? So kind of the one that comes to mind to me, just most recently, that was so impactful, again, I think because of its realism, was Fortune.
Oh, yeah.
I love that show. That set was so pretty. Yeah, that was, I think Brian really embraced his more it's realistic, but not. I kind of teased him about the Tim Burton-esque quality of that window, and I don't know if he'll let me live that down. And it was the first time that I'd been able to paint a drop. That's what you see now in that picture that is laid out on my floor in the shop, stapled muslin that I hand painted the cityscape on, that was used for the outside scenes in Fortune. Brian was going to initially get it printed onto a screen, which is what he does for a lot of his pictures. And I kind of joked with him about, hey, you have the Scenic painter, and you don't have her paint drops. And he thought about it for a day and came back to me and was like, do you want to do that? And I was like, absolutely. So then, I regretted it for a few days just because it was a big undertaking figuring out how to do that. And I haven't painted that many drops since we don't do it at the theater. But it was a great experience, and I was super proud of how it looked once we got it all put together.
When there's so much of your work, Rae, that, we see, but we may not necessarily know what all it takes for it to happen. For example, like the floor in St. Nicholas, right? And all of that stonework. That's one of my favorites.
I do love that time lapse. It makes me look really cool. Each tile had about 5 different steps to make it look. We were trying to get a worn slate look. So those are actually, what's the material that those are made
MDF.
of? MDF, and so they cut them for me and bring them in, and I round off all the edges and kind of make cracks and divots in them. And then there was a multi-step paint application to make them all look worn and individual. That was something that I tried really hard to do. So
yeah, and that one was an interesting one because a lot of times Brian will design a floor that it doesn't matter what piece goes where. That one, he actually drafted out the floor, and we had to cut each piece to the right size and then place it in the right place on the floor. It was like a
puzzle.
Yeah, it was a big puzzle piece.
Yeah.
And I can remember loading that show in. We get we start laying out the floor, and we get about 10 pieces in, and I lay one down, and I realize whoever had cut it upside down, and and Rae had painted the wrong side and everything. And so I have to go into the paint shop with my tail between my legs.
Rae,
we broke it. Can you fix it? So,
well, I'm sure that, with the amount of puzzles and puzzle sharing and everything that's been going on throughout the quarantine, I'm sure there are plenty of people who borrowed a puzzle from someone else only to find that one piece was missing.
Right.
So that is a very familiar struggle for a lot of people right now. Rae, you mentioned that you started with the painting with our education department, doing some of the drops for our preludes and things like that. But actually, over the past couple of years, you have created our photo ops for our lobby for our fairy godmother programs.
Those are so fun to do. Yes, I was asked to do this one in 2018, and it was our anniversary for the Fairy Godmother, as you well know. And so I was asked to represent the Fairy Godmothers of shows past. So you can see on the left-hand side, that's my sketch that I did and submitted to Lynn and yourself to get kind of an okay on the outfits. I tried to use outfits, pieces of outfits from past shows while I was designing it. And also making it so there were interesting poses, but also having the wands in there and everything. And then Jack and the rest of the carpentry boys cut out the holes and cut out the pieces for me. That first one ended up being quite big because I was painting it for adult size. So when we did the one for Frog Princess, I tried to make multiple sizes that were smaller. So there's actually a frog in the front for toddlers this time. So I think that was a lesson well learned on that.
Again, we always get a chance to learn.
That's right.
Exactly.
For anyone who is watching us, if you do have any questions for Jack or Rae, if you want to go ahead and put those into the comment box, we could definitely address those. So Rae, you know, it's so great to be able to see these moments of your painting. What other work are you doing? I know you're always working.
Yes, I do quite a bit of fine art on the side, just for fun and a little bit of business sometimes if I get commissions. And right now, I have submitted work for the virtual Fringe that's going on at the No. Every summer, the No Theater gets to have their Fringe Festival, but since we are all quarantined right now, they have adapted, as theater does, and made it a virtual Fringe. So I have sent in some of my digital pieces that I've just started teaching myself digital work in the last year or so. And so I did a series called Amazing Women in Cinema that are just basically, women in movies that inspired me to basically be who I am today, or that I think are really cool. And so we've got Mila Jovovich from the Resident Evil series on the right, and then we've got Natalie Portman as Evie Hammond from V for Vendetta on the left. And I tried to do different styles and textures with each piece and just use it as a learning experience for myself, as well as a really awesome opportunity from the No to showcase my work. So that was nice of them.
Yeah, those are amazing. I would have I have no idea where to start with that.
I usually start with doing a circle and then from there.
Using a pencil and a pad of paper and I can draw you something, but there's no way it's gonna look that good. Oh gosh, it is so wonderful to have you both on tonight, really, truly. And the comments and the people who are watching, just, you know, it really does give us a deeper appreciation for your work when we get to see it in the theater. You really just take some of those visions, those things that may be on paper, and really bring it to life. Oh, we have a loaded question. Carson McCall would like to ask, who is your favorite apprentice? Now, I'm going to actually shift her question, and I'm going to
ever. Favorite apprentice ever, right?
I'm going to make it a who is your favorite apprentice ever?
Ever.
So we cannot be biased to this year's class.
All right.
Oh, that's so hard.
Well, I know who mine is.
All right, you go
because
first.
I'm going to cheat and pick my tech apprentice, Brett Pavlovich. If that boy's out there, he's my homeboy. He was my tech apprentice my first year, so he was there for an Iliad and outside Mullingar, and he ran away for a little while, but we got him back in now, and he does a lot of overhire for us. So he's always kind of been my right hand here and there at Ensemble, which is nice. So
he's a good man.
He's a good man, yeah.
See, I would take a safe route, and I'm sorry to Jared and Patrick and Carson. I love all of you, but Becca Howell, like, hands down. I was not around when she was an apprentice, so maybe that's not an okay answer, but I love her. She's my bestie, and she also is one of my main overhire that comes in and helps me stain floor and stuff when I need to. I did teach her how to gold leaf on Frog Princess, and she was very excited about that.
And she helped you on Fly By Night.
She did. She was one of the people that helped put those tiles in. So.
Well, and as she is an education associate in my department, she's very near to my heart. But God, I mean, I would be shunned for the rest of my life if I did not say that my favorite apprentice, actually he was an intern at the time, would be Michael Carr.
Oh well, yeah. That's valid.
You know, I can't.
Nepotism.
Well, you know, Victoria Holly and Becca Howell and Carson and, you know, this whole class this year going through, you know, the upheaval that they did, Aiden and Alexia and Nora and Rachel and Christian and Josh, just absolutely amazing. You know, one of the things that we always say about the apprentices is that they are what keeps us all, you know, they are the glue that binds us
together. I do feel like we have a really awesome apprentice group every year. I feel like I don't really get to meet them a couple of shows in. It's just like their faces, and I don't really remember who they are until like probably the third strike. just because we don't get to see them as much as everybody else. But once we do start getting to know them, they're just always the sweetest people. So it's a really hard question, Carson. Thanks.
Watching, when Rae says the third strike, it's not you've done something bad, it's your third strike. Strike is taking down the set once the show has closed.
Yeah. Just in charge of it.
Yep. Happens in a day. Tear it all down.
Yep.
Woo. So we do have one last question. And I think this is actually a really great question. It is coming to us from Darnell. And Darnell is asking, what is the scariest part of the work that the two of you do?
You want to go first?
That's a heavy one, Darnell. Well, yeah, since you asked, it's real sometimes. What I mean by that is our jobs are dangerous. They have real dangers involved. And one of the scariest things for me is knowing that not only the people on my crew, but anybody that's on my set is trusting me that it's safe to be there. It really does, other people can try and take responsibility, but kind of at the end of the day, it's my crew, it's my, it's my work, it's my engineering that's being put to the test. And that's definitely terrifying.
It's pressure.
It is a lot of pressure, especially in moments where you've got, people are literally underneath things that you have hung grounded for one, or really anytime. I mean, anytime rigging in the theater is I won't get into rigging right now. I could talk your ear off about that. But
anytime there's something up.
It is, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of safety that is talked about in rigging and in theater and technical theater in general, and how safety oriented our jobs can be. And so it's those constant reminders, those daily checkups of making sure that everybody is abiding by the procedures that you've set in place to keep everybody safe. And then so I won't say that there's one moment in particular. I mean, there are several moments throughout the day where your stomach lurches because somebody's like doing something you don't want them to be doing. But in general, it's just the heavy responsibility of people's safety that is really laid on the tech staff in general. But yeah.
Mine's different because I do not have to be quite as worried about the general public. Jack has a massive responsibility, but as far as the scariest part of the work that we do, for me, it would be more of a psychological scary, in the sense that a lot of what I do is very hard to undo. As far as putting texture and paint on something, I usually only get one shot to make it look right. And Brian will tell me if I'm really worried about something that if we mess it up, we can just paint over it. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's a beautiful wood floor, or it's concrete, or it's something that you can't just paint over. So I would just say that the amount of responsibility that I have to do the testing that I need to do on sample pieces, and to make sure that I know my procedure well enough to not be taking something that they've worked really hard on and put into my shop and then messing it up and having them have to rebuild something. That's very difficult, because I don't have as much general responsibility, but I do have a lot of personal responsibility, as in I am the only one painting most of the time. So if something's wrong, it's usually my fault. So yeah.
Well, it was really great. Last summer, we had our very first technical theater intensive summer camp, which this summer will be a little bit different, because as we are very conscious as a theater with a social conscious to make sure that we are keeping everyone safe, back to your point, Jack, and that we are having our camps online. But last summer was really great for our students, our technical theater students, to learn from each of you those skills. And, I got to witness here and there, as I was directing a show with the other group of camps.
Running around crazy.
Congress.
Collected.
There are several of my past students who are watching us right now. Alex, you. But no, to see the two of you be able to translate this work and all of those, the safety and the training and the trial and error, and that it's okay to learn from those things to these high school students was really, really powerful. It was a really powerful thing for me to witness, and the feedback that we received from the students who were part of the first technical theater intensive camp that we held last summer, really reiterated that. So not only is your work translated on the stage to all of our patrons, our subscribers, our friends, our ETC family, our ensemble, but you both are very integral in training that next generation of those technicians who are going to continue those lessons that you've taught them to really make an impact. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Camp, and I couldn't even begin to thank you enough just for your knowledge and your willingness to share it with us, especially tonight.
Of course.
Well,
We're glad you asked us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It has been so much fun. For everyone who is watching, thank you so much. Again, I've had Rae Kuhn, our scenic charge artist and production assistant, and Jack Murphy, our technical director, with us tonight. It's been absolutely wonderful. So next week, coming up, we have the one, the only Tori Wiggins, actor, director. We are so excited to have her with us. We're so excited to have Tori joining us. So for all of you who are at home, please continue to stay safe, stay sane. See you next week. Thanks so much, guys. Good night.